I believe that frontline journalism is important. Without these photos and videos and first-hand experience, we can't really tell the world how bad it might be.
This is James Foley. He was a conflict journalist working in the Middle East, specifically telling stories in Libya, then Syria. And eventually, he was captured and killed by insurgents while working in Syria.
Today we learned he was apparently beheaded by ISIS militants in a graphic video that's been posted on the web.
He did so because he felt it was right. So did Tim Hetherington and Chris Hondros.
You have to be close. You can't do it from your hotel. You can't do it from across the street or across the bridge. You have to be there.
Because the only way to document stories of violence and disaster is up close. But that doesn't mean that journalists should head into these situations blind or expecting to die. Not just that, but conflict doesn't always show itself in the shape of war. Even though I've only barely started as a photojournalist, this is what I've learned about being prepared. The following is some of the best advice that I've received from journalists on the field. It covers going to protests, natural disasters, and some conflict journalism. For protests, my old photojournalism professor, Darren Dean, suggests wearing a neutral color like gray, since it has never been claimed by any group. Furthermore, when the tear gas is brought out, a rag soaked in vinegar might be your best bet. Leah Millis, a staff photographer at the San Francisco Chronicle, has said the following: "Follow your instincts and wear a helmet." After covering a few pro-Trump free speech rallies, she got some incredible photos, but not without incident. Some of the protesters tried to attack her. It's part of the job. And most importantly, in order to connect with both sides of the protest, if you want to talk to an officer, it might be better to go introduce yourself as a journalist. However, if you want to talk to some of the protesters, you should find someone who looks like you, or who might be receptive, and ask them to introduce you to a leader or someone with a story. That way, you're not just some journalist that is coming for a story, and our person cares. As far as natural disasters, I spoke with Caitlin Hall, a fellow photojournalist at UF who had the opportunity to travel to Puerto Rico as part of the Hurricane Maria coverage for WUFT. She said that the most important part of being prepared was knowing the culture. Since she didn't speak any Spanish, she was mostly relegated to the back lines until one of the victims invited her to have tea. And although ethical principles often say journalists should not accept any compensations, being invited for tea is part of the culture. And after being allowed into her house, she was able to see a completely different side of her subject. She could really tell her story now. Conflict journalism is what I have least experience on, and what interests me most. These are some conclusions I reached after watching both the James Foley story and Restrepo, as well as talking with Bruce Shapiro in our Ground Zero journalism class. For one, empathy is key. Through all the hardship, danger, and trauma that conflict journalists experience, at the end of the day, most of them get to go home. For those subjects in Ground Zero conditions, there is no other home to run to. This is their reality. Foley was successful in integrating into the culture and forging relationships with the locals, but in the end, he was too trusting and did not read the signs that many people's attitudes toward Western journalists had changed. Finally, something that Bruce Shapiro said that really struck me. Have some practices in your life that take you away from journalism. It's important to keep everything in perspective. Foley, Hondros, and Hetherington all had chances to go home, but returned to war as they couldn't deal with everyday life anymore. If you're going to live this life, make sure it does not destroy you.